what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about activities management, which is really kind of just a sly way of me saying we're going to talk about time management. So today's kind of a time management class, but here's what I'll tell you. We're going to approach it differently than probably you have ever seen a time management approach. And as part of that, we're also going to hit on like how it relates to real estate. And so here's what I will tell you is what I learned personally when I first was taught this, what I'm going to show you guys today, and implemented it into my business is part of, if you remember from the day one of lead generation, when we talked about the activities versus contacts versus setting appointments. Well, when I implemented that to where I would just set one appointment every day, my business took off. But as part of that, at the same time, I was implementing this of what we're going to talk about today into my business. And as I did that, it contributed to having my business really take off. So I'm a big believer in it. And in fact, one of the guys that I trained in this, who I would say probably still today uses it the most, I talked to him a couple of years ago. And I asked him, I said, do you still use what we call, you're going to hear me refer to as a tip analysis? And I said, do you still use the tip analysis in your business? And this guy's making, he and I went to lunch 2 years ago when we had this conversation. And at that time, I want to say it was over 600,000 a year is what he was making. Okay. So, and I asked him, do you still use this tip analysis in your business? And he said, yes. Anytime I feel like my business has gotten off track, I immediately go back and start using the tip analysis to get things back on track. So I would say for you, what we're going to talk about today, this tip analysis stuff is great in terms of getting your business up and running, but it's also going to be very helpful just throughout the rest of your career in real estate in terms of you using it. And I love baseball. And so I love to use the analogies from baseball of, in baseball, it is not uncommon for a hitter to get into a slump. Well, in real estate, we have slumps as well. Agents will go through times where they get into a slump. The way you get out of the slump is using this tip analysis. Okay. So this is a crucial tool for your business. Now, so with that being said, remember I said we're going to approach this from a little different perspective. And so I'm going to start that now with you. So let me get my screen share going here. Get this pulled up so you guys can see it here. Okay, so for you guys in the room, lights on or off? Off better?
Oh, off is fine.
Okay. All right. Now, so here's what we're going to do. So the first thing is that I'm going to talk to you about this Parkinson's law. So where this came from, and you guys probably are not aware of who this guy is, but the guy that discovered what we're going to talk about today is a guy by the name of C. Northcott Parkinson. And if you were to go back in time and say, okay, who kind of started business consulting, meaning companies that would go out and consult businesses to help them be more effective, probably the birth of that took place with this guy, C. Northcott Parkinson. Now, I don't know that he gets credit for that necessarily, besides for me, but what he did, and so we're going to talk about how he discovered all of this. So we're going to talk about two of Parkinson's laws. Okay, so the first one is this law of expansion. And here's what he found, is he said, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Now, where he got this from is he was working on his PhD thesis in the 1930s. And what happened is, as part of working on his PhD thesis, he was studying the Royal Navy. So in England, he's studying the Royal Navy, and he was studying these ships in the port of Southampton. And in the process of that is where he then discovered. So really, that's why when I say he's kind of the father of business consulting, is because as part of his PhD that he was working on in college, he did research to figure out what was going on basically with the Royal Navy. And in the process of that, he discovered these principles that are still hold true today in business. And the first one is this. And how he discovered this actually, though, is to me interesting, was when he did this, where he says work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Basically, what he discovered is he was observing the meetings that were going on in the Royal Navy. And what he noticed is in meetings, what would happen is that the agenda would fill up with information it would basically, let me rephrase it. I'll just say it this way. If a meeting was supposed to last an hour, guess how long the meeting lasted? Usually longer than an hour, but minimum of an hour, right? So that's part of what he found. And actually, usually what will happen most of the time, if you go to a meeting that is scheduled for a certain amount of time, very rarely is somebody going to try to get that meeting to end early. Meaning, whoever's in charge of the meeting, typically what's going to happen is whoever's in charge of the meeting, what they're going to do is they're going to run that meeting, keeping an eye somewhat on the clock and making sure that it fills up. Well, that's what he discovered. Now, how does that relate to us though? So now let me share with you how that relates to you and I in terms of real estate. So what he found was this, and what I noticed for me, now remember I told you learning these principles changed, was part of what changed for me in terms of my business really taking off, is because of understanding this. So what I noticed, and what I have noticed even with real estate agents, is this. If you say, I'm going to go and be at the office and work for these hours, work will expand to fill the time available for that, what you said. Let me say it to you another way. When you were in school and you had a project to work on, the work on that project would expand to fill the time available for its completion. Said another way, you waited till the last second to get the project done and turned in, typically is what we do, right? Well, that's what he found is, so that same thing happens with you and I. So really where we're headed with this, as part of what I'm talking about in this work expands to fill the time available for its completion, is there is no correlation between work and productivity, meaning time spent at work. What I mean by that is the more time you spend here at the office doesn't necessarily mean you're more productive. Even though I know a lot of agents, in fact, I'm thinking of one person in particular in this building that thinks because they're here all the time that they work harder than everybody else. Now, they may be here physically longer than everybody, but that doesn't correlate to being productive. So that's the good news for us in terms of real estate, meaning most other jobs, if you went and got it, they would tell you you're expected to be here from this time to this time, right? But in real estate, your job is to be productive. And if you can be productive in less time, good on you. Now, if you remember those that have participated in the lead generation class that I taught, when I talked about I was stuck in the contacts phase, and when I finally realized quit worrying about a number of contacts and instead focus on a number of appointments that I'm going to set. And the moment I switched to that, the guy that trained me in that, what he told me is if you'll do that, if you'll focus on appointments, not contacts, you will prospect half as much, but double your income. Well, that's essentially what we're talking about today is how do we be more productive with the time that we have so that we aren't doing this, just having work expand to fill the time available for its completion. What we're saying is how do we be more productive in a shorter amount of time so that we don't have to spend as much time in order to make a good living. Everybody follow me? All right. Any questions? Okay. All right. So now let me show you where this, for whatever reason, so, all right. The first time you try to click with this, it will never work. Okay, so this is what he found. So what you're looking at is this study that C. Northcott Parkinson did on the Royal Navy. And here's what he noticed. So I'm going to give this, I'm going to be saying the same thing, but in a different way again. Okay. So what he noticed is the number of ships that were in commission in the Royal Navy in 1914 was 62. In 1928, it had dropped down to 20. Now, part of that is because the war was over, right? So you had a war, you need 62 ships, the war's over, you don't need 62 ships anymore, so now they're at 20. So notice, it decreased by 67%. The number of men, officers of men in the Royal Navy went from 146 down to 100,000, or reduced 31%. So you would think when you're now not at war, you don't need as many ships, you therefore don't need as many men. You would think that you should also not need as many dockyard workers, you shouldn't need as many officials and clerks, and you shouldn't need so many other management. That admiralty officials, think of that as upper management, okay? So you would think with the number of ships going down, you wouldn't need as many, but notice what happened. What Parkinson found is that even though the number of ships went down dramatically, the upper management went up dramatically. And so what he found is that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Well, in this sense, we create work. So now this piece doesn't necessarily relate to you guys in real estate right now, maybe, but as you get more productive and you start to grow a team, this will come into play. Because what he found basically happens is if it's not managed properly, any company, every company out there, what will happen is they will find work to do. So let me say it this way. Sitting in a meeting somewhere, the upper management will look at it and go, what do we need to do to get to the next level? And somebody will say, you know what we ought to do is we ought to go out and get somebody to be in charge of social networking. And so then what happens is they go hire somebody now to market in terms of, social media. So they hire a social media marketer, which then goes and does all this stuff, which hopefully should contribute to the bottom line, but not always does it necessarily contribute to the bottom line. So the point of this is if you don't manage it, the same thing will happen in your business, meaning you will kind of be thinking, how do I get my business to go to the next level? And somewhere along the line, somebody will come along and go, you know what you ought to do is you ought to go hire somebody to do this or to do that. And you'll go, oh yeah, I should go do that. But all that does is expand the amount of stuff going on. It doesn't necessarily make you more productive is what we're saying, okay? Because so really that's what this is showing is they went and hired all these people, especially upper management, but they didn't have any more ships in commission, okay? All right, so now let's go to the second law. So the second law, so really what we're doing is I'm kind of laying the foundation to help you guys understand what gets in the way in terms of real estate agents, because this piece that we're going to talk about right now is the downfall of most agents that don't make it into business, I should say. And the ones who could be a lot more productive, they're not because of this, okay? So here's the second thing he found, is that he noticed that in their meetings, remember we were talking about meetings, that the time spent on any item of the agenda was in inverse proportion to its importance. So basically what that means is this, and this is still true today too, for you guys. Pay attention to this. Any meeting you ever go to where there is an agenda given, what will happen is they will have, the amount of time that are spent on the items of an agenda that a meeting you go to will be in inverse proportion to their importance. Meaning, you will spend the most amount of time on the least important things, and you spend the least amount of time on the most important things. Well, now, how does that relate to us in real estate? You, if you don't manage it, are going to spend during the reason we call this class activities management. So the activities that you're going to do during the day as a real estate agent, if you don't manage it, this is what will happen. You will spend the most amount of time on the least important things to your business, and you'll spend the least amount of time on the most important things, unless you manage it. Because that's just human nature of what happens, is that we spend the least amount of time on the most important things and the most amount of time on the least important things. All right, let me give you an example of that. Oh, actually, one other thing first, then I'll give you that example. The other principle, the third principle we're going to talk about is the Pareto Principle. You've heard it your whole life as the 80-20 principle, but this actually came from a guy an Italian economist. His name was Vilfredo Pareto. And he's the one who discovered the 80-20 rule, which basically goes in line with this Parkinson's law of triviality. Is what he found is in Italy, 80% of the production came out of 20% of the factories, and 20% of the production came out of 80% of the factories. So that same thing happens in real estate, actually. 80% of the production that a real estate company will do comes out of 20% of the agents, which means that 80% of the agents do 20% of the business. So 20% of the agents are doing 80%. The other 80% of the agents do the other 20. Like, so don't fall into that category is what I'm telling you, right? Okay, so this is what that looks like. Is again, tying these two principles together. This red line is the time that you spend on an activity. These blue would be 10 different activities you could do. And you'll notice if these first two made the biggest impact, we spend the least amount of time on them. And then as you get out into the least important activities, we spend the most amount of time on. Okay. All right. So now let me give you the example of this. So this comes out, what I'm going to share with you came out of the Wall Street Journal, where what happened is they had gone and done this study, they reported on it, and then shared in the Wall Street Journal basically what they had found. And this is what it was. So the Boston School District was having their meeting. Now, who makes up school district boards? So who are the people who end up being on a school district board? Do you guys know?
Administrators, principals.
Okay, so it's going to be some administrators and principals, but most of the time, the people in charge of a school district board are not administrators or teachers.
Community members.
Yeah, which is another way of saying basically parents. So the parents, so here's what happens, is you have parents of kids in the school who decide they want to get involved because they want to make sure that the school is run better and those type of things. So what we're going to take a look at here was a meeting that took place in the Boston School District by these parents that were on the school board. Okay. Now, here's what happened. So they were going to have a 1-hour meeting. In this 1-hour meeting, there were 2 items they were going to be discussing. The first item was, or one of the 2 items was a $1.5 million annex. So like they were going to be building onto a building. Okay. The other item was a $200,000 item. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet because I first want you to see the principle behind it. Then I'll share with you what this $200,000 item was. So the $1.5 million was basically to build a new building. The difference between the high bid and the low bid on that $1.5 million building was $200,000. Okay. And what ended up happening is they ended up taking the high bid, the $200,000. So they chose the person out of the 2 bids they had, they chose the one that was highest, which was $200,000. Now you'll understand why here in a second. The other item was a $200,000 item, and the difference between the high bid and the low bid on it was $10,000. And they took the low bid on that one. Now, here's the question for you. Well, actually, first, let me say one other thing. So in this meeting, it was a 1-hour meeting. They were supposed to have spent the majority of the time talking about this $1.5 million item. But they spent, of this 1-hour meeting, they spent 57.5 minutes talking about this. Then they spent 7.5 minutes on this. So the meeting went over. Okay. 57.5 minutes talking about this. They took the low bid and saved $10,000. 7.5 minutes talking about this and took the high bid. So they spend an extra 200. So here's the question for you. What do you think they spent 57.5 minutes talking about right here? Any ideas? What would you guess? And you guys on Zoom can participate too. So what do you think?
New computers.
Nope. Simpler.
New playground.
Nope. Simpler.
I would think something that didn't have anything to do with it, probably.
Anything to do with what?
Well, I guess the low bid.
Oh, yes. No, well, actually, they were talking about the item, this $200,000 item. They were talking about it. It didn't have anything to do with the 1.5 million directly. I mean, kind of, I guess, but so what do you think they spent? 57, and it's simpler, like simple.
Like flooring or something like that.
More simple than that.
Paper?
You're getting close. Toilet paper. They spent 57.5 minutes arguing over what type of toilet paper they should buy. And at the end of the day, they took the low bid. They saved $10,000. But then they spent 7.5 minutes talking about this building and went with the high bid. Now, here's the thing. If you understand why they did that, if you understand why that happens, it will give you huge insight to why you do what you do in your real estate career. And really just anything that you're involved business with. So why do you think they spent so much time talking about toilet paper and so little time talking about the building?
To them, it was important.
Okay, good. You're on the right track. Now, but here, watch this. So even this includes you guys on Zoom. So unmute and share with me if you've done this. If you have written a personal check in the last year or bought something personally and spent $1.5 million, let me know. Okay. How about this one then? If you or someone in your household in the last year bought toilet paper, raise your hand. Or you guys on Zoom could say yes.
Yes.
Which this was a great joke, actually, when I was teaching this class. Thank you on Zoom. This was a great joke when I was teaching this class not long after we had all this toilet paper frenzy, because then people were like, yeah, see, it's important. But so, okay, good. So the reason why we can spend so much time talking about toilet paper is what?
Deal with it every day.
That's right.
Everybody relates to it.
We can all relate to it. And not said another way, we are all familiar with toilet paper. But now remember, the reason I brought up that the people who make up the school district board are just parents. So how much experience do most of those parents, which a lot of times it ends up being moms, how much experience do those moms have in understanding building codes and earthquake violation or code violations and how we should build the building to make it the best building that we could get? Therefore, they assumed what? What did they, I mean, from the information we have, all we can assume is the reason they took the high bid is why?
Better quality.
That's right. We're talking about their kids in the school, and therefore, if we're going to do this, we want to have the best building, the safest building out there so that our kids are safe and protected. So let's just go with the high bid on that. See, what ultimately it boils down to is this. Now, remember, what we're talking about is the law of triviality. Time spent on any item of an agenda will be in inverse proportion to its importance. See, the reason we spend so much time on these things, and let me tell you how this is going to relate for you guys in real estate.
Didn't understand the subject. That's
Say that
why.
again.
Didn't understand the subject.
That's right. Good. Yes, that's right. So because we're not familiar with it, so you say understand, I'm going to say it as familiar, but you're right on. Because we're not familiar with it, we're not comfortable with it, we will spend time on the things we're comfortable with. So now, in terms of you and real estate, especially you guys that are newer or new to real estate, you're typically not going to be comfortable with doing the things that will contribute the most amount of money to your income. Therefore, work will expand to fill the time available for its completion, meaning you'll find busy work to do that makes you feel like you're being productive and successful, when in reality, It's no different than this. Like, stop and think about it. Do you really need this? Did they need to spend 57.5 minutes arguing over toilet paper? No. But the reason they did is because they're familiar with that. They understand it. We can argue effectively as to, is 2-ply better than the 1-ply, or the, how soft is it? And like, we all can argue that. But when it came time to talking about the building, they don't know, like, why is one higher than the other, and therefore they go with that. Okay, so the reason we get ourselves in trouble in real estate is because we are more familiar with the things. So I guess let's talk about that. What would be some things in terms of real estate that you are comfortable with today? Well, okay, how about if I help you this way? Were any of you really nervous and scared about coming to class today?
No.
So that would be one of the things that we do in terms of now, please don't, you guys on Zoom, don't all hang up. You guys don't get up and leave. But one of the things that hurts us in terms of our production in real estate is back tied to this same concept. There are some people, and I don't believe, well, I'm not worried about who's on Zoom. I don't believe there's anybody on here that's doing this, but I have had some people that come and sit through like all of the classes over and over and over and over and over. And the reason they do it is because then they can feel like I'm working because I went and sat in on this class, and they can go home tricking themselves into feeling like, well, I worked today. When in actuality, it's just, back to work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Well, I should go to that class so that I can get ready, so that I can make sure I understand what I'm doing, so that when somebody asks me to help them write an offer or buy the house or whatever, I know what I'm doing. So now the opposite of that is, like, the reason I say don't hang up or don't get up and walk out of the class is because, yes, you do need to learn the stuff and you need to sharpen your saw. Like, so I don't want to take away from that. And I will tell you, for me, the reason I'm even up here training this was what happened is I had built my business up and was the top agent in my office. I left the company I was with and went to another company, and my business cut in half, just even that first year. And so part of what I learned from that was there is magic in being around the right people, because I wasn't when I left to this other company. And so when I went back, I was like, I've got to get this stuff so ingrained in me that I don't forget it. Because when I left and went somewhere else. So after that, I went and sat in on these classes that I'm now teaching to you guys over and over, because I was wanting to get it so ingrained. So like, I don't judge when people are constantly coming, but there's a difference between somebody that's coming because, like I said, with my friend that I told you that uses this concept still today in his business, making $600,000 a year or more. There is a difference between somebody who's coming to class for that purpose of, like, I'm in a slump and I got to get out, to somebody who's doing it as a way to fill the time available. I shouldn't have to go all the way back, but to fill the time available so that they feel like they worked. Does that make sense? Okay, so now, what are the things in terms of real estate that you are least familiar about? So I brought up, what are you familiar with? And in fact, actually, let me say a few more. Some of the other things that I watch agents fill their time with is this. Oh, I got a question. Like, I just came across, like, in their prospecting or whatever, somebody will ask them a question, they don't know the answer to it. They will quit prospecting right then to go find the answer right then. And again, it feels logical to us that, well, I should go and learn how to get that answer. But the best thing you could say was, okay, I'm going to write down that question and then I'll deal with it later on. And I'll show you where I would deal with it. But prioritizing your prospecting as being the most important thing you can do, and then sticking to it. Let me give you another one, is going on to the MLS and doing research. or saying, I'm gonna go do some CMAs and spending a whole day working on doing a CMA because you want to get comfortable with doing CMAs. Going to a class at the board, getting involved. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do some of this stuff, but I'm just saying this is what some people do that gets in the way of their success. There are some that go, I got to go get involved at the board. Maybe if I go network, because I should get to know other agents better. So I'm going to go get involved in a committee at the board. And again, not necessarily a bad thing, but some people, that's what stops them from producing, is because they get in and get involved and they start spending all this time at the board. And again, they feel like, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing good things, which is true. I agree. But it takes away from them making money. Okay. All right. Questions before I go to the next piece. I always feel like I got to stall a little longer because some people on Zoom, it's delayed a second or two. So the fact that nobody's unmuted, I think we're good now. Okay. So what are the things though that we're least familiar with? What are the things? So here's what I want you guys to answer for me is, what are the things in real estate that you're most worried about, that like scare you, or you're concerned, or you're worried somebody's going to ask you, something. You guys tell me. What are the
prospecting?
Say that again.
Prospecting.
Okay, good. Prospecting. What else?
Contracts.
Okay, good. The fact of if all of a sudden somebody walked in the door right now and said, hey, I want to write an offer, who can help me? Like, it's interesting because if that happened, let's assume that everybody that's on Zoom was here in person and somebody walked in and did that, it would be interesting to see how few people actually would be like, no, I'll take it. Because they're kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do. Okay, good. What else would be things we're least familiar with?
Buyer's presentation or.
Okay, good. That's what I was good. That was the one I was looking for, is either meeting with a buyer and doing a presentation, or with a seller to say, hey, let me show you what we do to get your home sold. Okay, good. Now notice though, that those things, the things that you're least familiar with or that you're most worried about, are the very things that are going to, so going back again to this 80-20, those are the things that are the most important things you could do. And notice that we will let the little things get in the way to fill up our day so that we can go home feeling like we worked, but we actually really weren't. So again, the whole point of what I've said so far is to get you into this mindset of there is no correlation between time spent at work and being productive. Meaning you can be very productive in very little amount of time. And that's what we're going to work on and show you now. Okay. All right. So let me fast forward here. All right. So now I introduced this a little bit. We're now going to talk about something that we call a TIP analysis. So TIP is an acronym, and somebody gave me, because there's actually one other letter that we don't use, and I can't remember now what they called it PINT, P-I-N-T analysis. So I may actually change it to PINT analysis from TIP analysis, but you'll see why here in a second. But really the TI and the P are the most important, so that's why I haven't worried about the M. So, but anyway, okay, let's talk about it. So the T stands for total time that you spend at work. So what I'm going to give you guys, remember I said this is a great strategy if you're ever in a slump or to get your business up and rolling. Okay. So for you guys that are brand new, this is probably one of the most important things. And in fact, actually, Joaquin, how did you, when I came in this morning, you said something about like whatever I'm teaching seems to be like the next thing you needed, or how did you say?
The logical next step, like how when you're listening to like Eric Clapton, he's like a good guitar phenom, and every next note he plays sounds like the logical next note that song, it just sounds right, like that's the direction it was supposed to go. And kind of like with this training, it was just kind of like a little analogy of sorts.
Yeah, which
like,
thank you, and I appreciate it.
every class is like logically that's the next step that I should be thinking about. Or
Okay, good. So hopefully this is the next step you guys should be thinking about, okay? Because here's the thing. So now, one of the things I want to point out to you, pay attention as we go through this. I will probably, I don't think I will ever tell you a certain number of hours you should work. I don't think I'm ever gonna say that, okay? But we still need to know the total time. So one part of the factor of keeping track of you knowing how productive you are with your time is you do have to keep track of your total time, whatever it is, okay? So I'm not saying it should be at a certain amount, but I'm just saying in order for you to use this system, the first thing we have to know is how many hours did you work? And I would define did you work as that in your mind you were actually working. Because to some extent, one of the bad things about this business is it can become a 24/7 job. And in fact, I had an assistant that worked with me at one point, and we had gone out on a listing presentation, and he was fairly new. And at this listing presentation, he said to the seller, we're available 24/7. Is what he said. We're available 24/7, 365 days a year. And I was like, hold on, I'm not available 24/7, 365 days a year. He is, I guess, but I'm not. And I said to them, you should test him on that. Give him a call at like 3 o'clock in the morning and see if he answers the phone, because I can promise you, if you call me at that time, I'm not answering the phone. I am not a 24/7. So, but we do need to know the total time that we believe that we're working, okay? The I stands for indirectly productive. Now I'm going to show you what all these look like here in just a little bit. We're going to go through these in detail. But the I is indirectly productive. So I'll define that for you shortly. But remember, and so the P is equals productive time. Now, so remember what we've been talking about is there's no correlation between time spent at work and being productive in what you are doing, okay? But there are things that you can do that are indirectly productive that will lead to productivity, and that's why these three are so important. So, and then as I said, there also is an end, which is non-productive. And so I don't know, I'm still back and forth on if I should change the name to a pint analysis or tip. I just have used tip analysis for so long that I'm like, I just like that. It's hard to switch. Yeah, it's hard to switch for me, but and is non-productive. Now, let me classify. So for you guys that have written down notes on that, put in parentheses, non-productive does not mean not important. So you could just say does not equal not important or something. But I just want to make sure you guys understand, because as we go through and talk about this, some of the stuff, anytime I say it's non-productive, you're going to hear not important. But that's not what I'm saying. Non-productive does not mean that it's not important, because a lot of the things that are non-productive are really, really important. It's just, I want to make sure you guys understand that they're not productive. They may be important, but they're not productive, okay? All right, now, so on the tip analysis. Oh, yeah, so sorry, I just gave you the first one. What are the things in real estate? What are the things that what are the activities that we could do that we would classify as productive? I already just showed you the one if you were paying attention. What would be the productive things we could do? And you guys on Zoom can participate too. Okay, good. So listening point. Oh, sorry, I cut you off on Zoom. Is that what you were saying?
Well, I was saying prospecting that.
Okay, good. So actually, so she brought up prospecting. Actually, prospecting is not one of the productive things we can do. Prospecting actually falls under indirectly productive. And I'll explain why that is in just a minute. So first, I want to get all the productive things listed here. And then after we've listed the productive things, I'll tell you why prospecting is not considered productive. It's actually considered indirectly productive. Okay. So what other things would we put up there as productive?
Staging an open house, maybe.
So staging an open house, actually.
Or having an open house.
So, okay, good. So we'll talk about that in a sec. So staging an open house would actually be non-productive. Now remember, that doesn't mean it's not important. It's just non-productive. Holding the open house actually may be indirectly productive. And I'll explain that in a second as well. So what other things could be productive then? Okay. Good. I'm not even sure. I don't even remember what order I put these up here. So,
Following up on clients.
okay, good. So thank you. Following up on clients is going to be indirectly productive.
Okay.
And so that's gonna, you're doing really good on the indirectly productive.
That's why.
Oh, you're good. And I'm gonna show you in a little bit, those are actually more important than the productive. And I'll tell you why that is. So you're doing good because technically they're more important. Well, they're not, but they are. What other things would be productive?
Writing an offer.
Good job. Well, so every time you say one, I'll give you a different one, I guess. Okay, so yes, writing an offer is one of them though. The next one that I apparently have on my list here is showing properties to a buyer who has signed a buyer broker would be productive. Then let's see what I have next here. Oh, I was hoping I had writing an offer next, but I didn't. Price reductions. Getting a price reduction from a seller is productive. And then here's your writing an offer. Writing an offer is productive, okay? And then I think this is the last one I have is negotiating offers. Oh, I might have one more. Let me see. Yep, that's what I said. And then closing. So price reductions, writing offers, negotiating offers, and closing. Those are all productive things. Now, why? Well, actually, look, before I say why, let me ask you this. When you look at those, what do they all have in common? So what's the commonality between every one of those things?
There's a client.
Perfect.
And they're all things that you have to do.
What did he say? Did he say what?
Yeah, so he said there is a client there.
Oh,
So
client.
yeah,
Okay.
here's how I usually think of it. At a listing appointment, you're face to face with the person. Buyer appointment, you should be face to face with them on that. Showing property to somebody who's signed a buyer broker, you're in person with them. Getting a price reduction, not always are you in person with them, but somewhat. Writing an offer should be basically, even though you might do it electronically, still would be like you're on the phone talking to them and doing that. Negotiating, same thing. Closing, they're showing up. So here's how I like to think of it. The things in this business that are productive. Now remember, this whole thing we're talking about is there's no correlation between time spent at work and being productive, is where I'm trying to get you guys to go. Notice every one of these things is typically in a selling situation and, well, actually, let me ask it this way. Let me show you what I mean. What are you hoping to have happen at the end of a listing appointment?
Sign the contract.
Okay, good. What are you hoping to happen at a buyer appointment?
Sign a buyer.
Sign the buyer.
Okay, what are you hoping having to have happen when you go out and show properties to a buyer?
Have them right off.
Write an offer.
Okay, what do you want to have happen when you go talk to a seller about a price reduction?
Sell the house.
Use it and sell it.
That they sign a price reduction. What about when you write an offer? What do you hope to have happen?
Accepted, being accepted.
Okay, when you're negotiating offers, same thing. What's going to happen at a closing?
Get paid.
So, yeah, good. So what do all of those have in common? What was the commonality when I said, what's going to happen at the end of the appointment?
It's all the next step. It's all part of the process.
Somebody's going to sign something. Notice that. The reason these are the most productive things we can do is because at the end of that appointment, somebody should be signing a contract. That's what's happening, is there's contracts being signed. That's why they're the most productive things that you can do. Okay. Now, let's go to your indirectly productive. So now on indirectly productive, we already talked about prospecting. The other thing that I would fall under that category of prospecting would be the lead follow-up contained within prospecting. So let me explain this one. So in terms of, and I don't have slides for this, but in terms of your prospecting, there are active ways of prospecting and there's passive ways of prospecting. And so when Joaquin brought up doing an open house, I would say that an open house could be productive, or excuse me, indirectly productive and considered prospecting as long as people show up and you actually set appointments. And the reason I was hesitant on it as in terms of that is if you went and did an open house and not one person showed up, I would say that's non-productive, not indirectly productive. Because if nobody showed up, you can't be indirectly productive from that. So for me, anytime we are talking about any type of passive prospecting, I only would count passive prospecting. So let me define passive prospecting. Passive prospecting would be an open house because you're waiting for people to come to you. Sending out a mailer, doing some type of an advertisement and mailing it out is passive prospecting. Doing a social media post is going to be passive prospecting. So the only way I would ever count a passive form of prospecting as indirectly productive is if I set an appointment. So if I do an open house, and I'm going to spend a few minutes on this because I want to make sure you guys understand it because it's crucial to your understanding how to tell, either get your business up and running or get you out of a slump. If you do it an open house and let's say you had 10 people come to the open house and you got appointments, you did let's say a 4-hour open house, you were there for 4 hours. 10 people came and you set 2 appointments. How much time, how many hours would I say you could count as indirectly productive? Would you guess? What would your guess be? So it was a 4-hour open house, 10 people came and you got 2 appointments. How many hours would you get a count as being productive or indirectly productive? Sorry.
4 hours.
An hour for each appointment.
No, that's what it is.
Is that-
Joaquin said it. Sorry. So in case you guys on Zoom didn't hear it, you get to count 1 hour for every appointment you set. Okay, but now let me test you on that. So there's 10 people that came. I was there for 4 hours and I set 5 appointments. No, let's do 6. I set 6 appointments. How many hours of indirectly productive do I get?
It was only a 4-hour open house.
Yep.
I guess 4 hours.
Good. Awesome. Yes,
Yeah.
4 hours. You can't. So if you did an open house and you set 6 appointments in that 4-hour period, you still only get it counted as 4 hours of it being indirectly productive. So you get 1 hour. Now remember, I'm talking about passive prospecting. Anything where you're waiting for people to come to you. Okay. If you're waiting for people to come to you, so you did a social media advertisement, you did some type of a mailing, you went and put, a lot of times people will just go put like stuff on people's doors. They won't actually knock on the door. They'll just go put them on doors. That would be passive. An open house, passive. So you can count 1 hour as indirectly productive for every appointment you set up to the total number of hours. You can't go beyond the total number of hours. So that's why if you set 6 appointments and you were there for 4 hours, you only get it counted as 4 hours indirectly productive. Make sense? Okay. All right. Now let's go through and talk about non-productive. So we did, your total is just the total to hours you worked. Productive is anytime you're face-to-face in a selling situation that you're expecting somebody to sign a contract. Okay. Indirectly productive is any type of prospecting you are doing. Non-productive is everything else. Anything we have not talked about. So actually, let me test you to make sure. Now remember, non-productive does not mean not important before I say what I'm about to say. So sitting here in class, which category would it fall under? Productive, indirectly productive, or non-productive?
Productive.
Non-productive.
Non-productive.
Non-productive. Now, that's why I said, remember, that doesn't mean not important, so don't get up and leave. But non-productive just means, here's how I like to think about it. Non-productive activities, if that is all you ever did, you never, like, if you, let's just say that you were working 50 hours a week, and for 50 hours a week, all you did was go to class for 50 hours a week for 10 years. How much money are you gonna make? Zero.
Zero.
Yeah, because that's non-productive. So that's why I'm saying, it doesn't mean it's not important. It just means it's non-productive, okay? Now, what about this? What if all I ever did was CMAs? I just sat down and ran CMAs on people's houses. Non-productive. So doing a CMA, non-productive. What about, so Joaquin brought up staging an open house. That's all you ever did. You're never gonna make it money. Yeah, so that's why, now remember, like, do you need to do a CMA before you go on a listing appointment? Yes. So that's why I'm saying, I'm not telling you don't do it. I'm just saying, if that's all you ever did. So when people sit and spend time looking at the MLS all day, every day, that's non-productive and you're not going to make any money from it. Okay. All right. Now, so here's the next piece of this. So now with what I've explained to you so far, here's the next piece of this. Now, remember, I told you this is what you want to use. This tool is what you're going to use to get your business up and running. Or if you're in a slump ever, you're going to use it to get out of a slump, or you're just going to use it to even go to the next level. But this is what you want to be tracking. So every single week, month, however you want to do it, day that you work, you should be keeping track of the activities that you do. And I just realized I forgot to bring a paper in here that I need to give to you guys. So I'll get it. I will get it at the end. Just do not leave without reminding me to get it to you. And for you guys that are on Zoom, if you'll shoot me an email, I'll email it to you. So let me actually throw my email in the chat box here. And did everybody put in their name in from Zoom into the chat box?
Yes.
Okay. So if you guys on Zoom will send me an email, so Mariela, send me the email.
Oh, sorry.
But if you'll send me the email, then I will forward it on to you.
Okay.
Because you're gonna want to use that. But here's what we want to be tracking. So you want to be keeping track basically every day that you work. Now, you don't have to do this forever. Remember, you're going to use it to get your business up and running. Or if you ever feel like you're in a slump and want to get out of the slump, you're going to use this. Or when you're like, I want to take my business to the next level, you're going to use it. So the reason I clarify that is because most people leave this class and won't go and do what I'm going to ask you to do just because it seems overwhelming. It's not, but it seems like it would be. So here's what I did. So for me, now the good news is technology has made this so much easier. But for me, 20-ish years ago when I first started doing this, what happened is I had the watch that I had was an Ironman triathlete watch. And you could set that watch. I could go in and set a timer for it to go off every 15 minutes. Now, most people either have, well, everybody's either got a smartphone or a smart watch. But on the watch, I've got on here timers and I could go in and create a 15, well, there already is. There's a 15-minute timer there that I could just hit right now and it's starting to count down 15 minutes, okay? So what I did with this was when I would get to work, and I'm gonna give you guys the paper that you would track this on. When I would get to work, what would happen is I would start my timer. And then as soon as I had started my timer, I would then go to work. And then after 15 minutes, my watch would beep. All of a sudden it would start to beep. And then what I did is I would hit reset. So it would start over the 15-minute timer. And then I would write down what I did during that 15 minutes. So whatever I had done during that 15 minutes, I would then go write that down. Somehow I lost the, okay, there we go. So I would write it down, what I did, the activity that I had done, and then I would look at it and say, was it productive? Was it indirectly productive? So if it was one of these items, I would write down, I would put a little P next to it for productive. If I was prospecting, I would put an I next to it for indirectly productive. If it wasn't any of those things, I put an N next to it. Okay. Then what would happen is 15 minutes later, my timer would go off again. I would stop and write down what I had done. And then I would either put a P, an I, or an N next to it. And then at the end of the day, when I was done working, I would add up each of those items to see how many items were productive, how many of those 15-minute increments were productive, how many of them of those 15 minutes were indirectly productive. And then I would add those two together. Okay. So what you're looking for, and this is how, again, this is how you're going to get your business up and running or ever out of a slump if you're in one, is you're going to look at those two added together to see, was it at least 60% of your time? Did you spend at least 60% of your time doing either productive or indirectly productive? So let me make sure you guys understand what I just said. I just allowed for you to have 40% of your time, almost half of your time could still be spent non-productively, okay? But here's what I'm telling you, as long as you're at least 60% productive in your time, you're gonna make money in this business, and you're gonna make good money in this business. So now remember, I told you I went to lunch a couple of years ago with a buddy of mine that I know still uses this. I asked him, do you still use it? And he said, yep, anytime I get off track, I immediately go back to this. And so what he's looking for is, am I spending 60% of my time being productive or indirectly productive? Now, here's why. The reason why is because, are you ever going to have any listing appointments, buyer appointments? Well, let me go back to this again. How do you get any of these things? Where do they come from?
Some sort of prospecting.
Yeah, that's why I was saying to you, the prospecting is really, truthfully, more important. Now, it's not really, but it kind of is more important than any of these things. Because if you're not prospecting, you won't have these. So now, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute here. But for right now, the formula you're looking for is until you feel like you're making the income you want from this business, you should be tracking your time like this. Every day that you're working, you're keeping track of every activity that you're doing in a 15-minute increment. Now, let me actually, when I first started training this to people, I was a little nervous to say, you got to write down what you did every 15 minutes. But then I was talking to a friend of mine that's an attorney, and I learned, I didn't know this before, but an attorney actually has to write down every 6 minutes what they were doing. They have to keep track of their time in 6-minute increments. Now, here's the other thing, is they are expected to get so many billable hours in a day. And in order to do that, they have to do it in 6-minute increments. And so in order for an attorney to get, like, let's say 8 hours of billable time, those 6-minute increments of productive time, it usually is going to take them like 12 hours to get to 8 hours. So that, once I learned that, I was like, okay, I don't feel bad telling you guys, you got to keep track of what you're doing in 15-minute increments, because like typically you would stop and look at and think about an attorney making a lot of money, right? Well, if you want to make a lot of money, you got to do kind of what they do. So I'm just asking you to do it in 15-minute increments. Every 15 minutes, what did you do? Was it productive, indirectly productive, or non-productive? Okay. All right. Here's what you can learn from it is, anytime those two added together, your indirectly productive and your productive time are less than 60%, the answer is you need to spend more time prospecting. Okay, that's the secret. If you're less than 60% between productive and indirectly productive, this is how you need to spend more time prospecting. Now, remember I said to you, I'm not going to ever tell you like this is how many hours you should work. In fact, to some extent, what you should be seeing from this is you almost actually want to try to work less hours. You just make sure that they're packed full of indirectly productive or productive time. Meaning, if let's just say that somebody was working 50 hours a week and you find that in your 50 hours a week that you're working, you're spending less than 60% in the productive and indirectly productive, part of the problem could be
that you're just hanging out to hang out. Remember I said that to you, that I know of someone who brags about how much they're at the office. Yet, if they actually tracked their time of indirectly productive versus productive, they would find that the majority of that time they're doing non-productive activities, meaning they're walking around just talking to people. Well, yeah, that you might feel like, oh, I'm the first one in the office and the last one to leave every day. Well, so what? If you're not making the money, who cares, right? So to some extent, you can look at this and say, okay, maybe I should shrink it down. So now, with me, when I started doing this, that's part of what happened is I actually ended up starting to go home earlier in the day because I had fulfilled what I needed to do and I was able to still hit this 60%. Now, what I don't want you to do though is interpret that as, okay, Russ just told me I should work 10 hours a week and just make sure that 6 out of those 10 hours that I work during the week are productive or indirectly productive. Well, to some extent that could work, but I will tell you, like, if you said, well, I'm going to work 3 hours a week then, and I'll just make sure that of the 3 hours in the week, that 2 of them are spent prospecting, like, it's probably not really going to work because you do have to, there is probably a minimum amount of work you have to put in, but to some extent, I would even still say there are a lot of agents that if they did actually only prospect 2 hours a week and spend 1 hour a week doing other non-productive stuff, would make more money than they do right now being here 40 hours a week because they don't do any productive or indirectly productive. It's all non. So, all right. Okay, so now next thing. So now I'm going to give to you guys what the ideal schedule. Ricky Bobby.
Man, I thought I was missing in the ball game, but here we are.
Or I like to call him Uncle Rico. Because Rick could throw a football over that mouth.
Oh, they wrestle the muscle can do that.
All right, so now here's what I am going to give to you. What the sketch. So our top producing agent in our company is an agent down in St. George. His name is Brian Burnett, and I'm going to give to you essentially. This is not exactly his schedule. There are a couple of minor things that are different, but essentially this is his schedule. Okay, so every morning at 7 o'clock, so Rick must have known I was getting to this right now, right? My recommendation for you guys is you should be participating in some type of a role play. And Rick offers that. It can be done on Zoom, because I know we've got at least one person down in St. George on here right now. You can get on via Zoom to participate, but 7 a.m. every day in this room is live role play. If you live too far away, you don't want to drive in, jump on Zoom. I don't know if you still do. Are you still getting people from California that
I
jump
got
on?
from Texas, Florida, California, Colorado.
Oh, and Washington too.
And Washington.
Yeah. So anyway, you can jump on from other, if you're not here, then get on to do role play. Okay. But do some type of a role play. Okay. 8 o'clock is morning ascent. So now Brian Burnett, that is our top agent down in St. George, I don't believe that he's currently participating in morning ascent. So that's when I said that
But he does role play.
yeah, he does do role play, but there's some minor things that maybe he doesn't do, but he did participate in morning ascent. So if you want to get to where he's at, you got to go to morning ascent too. Okay. So morning ascent again is in this office and broadcast out on Zoom every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday and Thursday, it should be done in every office live in person. I'm not sure that's happening, but it's supposed to be. Okay. Then at 9 o'clock, you want to be on the phone prospecting. So from 8, morning ascent, typically 8 to 8:30. Sometimes it'll go to 8:40 or 8:45. But then you're going to use that time between 8:30 or 8:45 to 9 to kind of get prepped and ready to go. 9 o'clock, be on the phone prospecting. Prospect until basically noon. So Brian Burnett. So Marielle, you're in St. George, right? Did I lose you?
Were they able to talk through it today?
Sorry, I unmuted myself without, I forgot that I muted.
But you're-
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Is what I'm saying true? Does Brian Burnett, is he in there prospecting essentially from 8 till noon every day?
Probably longer than that.
Okay, so, but minimum of that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. So she's verifying for what I'm telling you. So prospecting from 9 until noon. Noon, go ahead and stop and do lunch from noon to 1. 1 o'clock, do lead follow-up. So at 1 o'clock is when you're gonna go through and spend from 1 until 2 doing your lead follow-up, following up on any leads that you've gotten. 2 o'clock then is your appointment prep time. So now part of where this has changed for Brian Burnett is he's got a team now, meaning he's got assistants that can do a lot of this stuff. So when she said he's spending more time than that prospecting, it's because he's now at a point where he's got an assistant who takes care of a lot of this stuff, which I'll talk about that more too in a minute. But for you guys, 2 o'clock should be your appointment prep time. Remember I said to you, a lot of times what will happen is during this 9 to noon time, agents will be on the phone prospecting, and then they'll set an appointment. And then they immediately go, oh, they hang up and they, Rick, does this not happen to you? Rick, I just got this appointment for a potential, for a listing. And can you help me do a CMA on it?
Here's what I'll tell you. Your emergency is not my emergency.
But
Yes, that happens.
But here's my point. For you guys, instead of stopping your prospecting to go and do the CMA, you have a time built in for it. Your appointment prep time is when you should do that. So at 2 o'clock is when you then go, okay, now I got to go do the CMA. Now, here's why. If you stop in the middle of your prospecting to go do that, you're missing out. Think of it this way. Remember I just said you 60% of your time needs to be spent between indirectly productive and productive. The moment you stop and the agent goes into Rick and goes, hey, Rick, can you help me do a CMA? Or Rick, I just got this appointment and I don't know what to do. And what should I do about this or that? All of a sudden, you're now doing non-productive things. Now, again, that doesn't mean it's not important and you don't need to do it. Just do it down here. Just kind of what I'm saying. Make sense? Okay. 3 o'clock then is when you should have your first appointment, and 5 o'clock. So for Brian Burnett, his goal every day is to fill those 2 slots. Not necessarily that day, meaning you're not necessarily trying to set an appointment for 3 o'clock that day up here. I mean, great if you can, but you're just trying to make sure that every day going forward, you're filling these slots. So my prospecting here might be about getting an appointment tomorrow or the next day and filling those slots, but you want to fill up those slots. Then with Brian, he will do a 7 o'clock appointment. I didn't put it on here. 1 day a week, he'll do a 7 p.m. His goal is to be home at 6 o'clock to eat dinner with his family every day. But 1 day a week, he will do a 7 o'clock appointment. So in the event you came across somebody who said, well, I can't meet till 6 o'clock, then you could say, okay, I could meet you at 7 or something. So he'll do that 1 day a week. And then on Saturday, he will meet with people that can't meet at 3 or 5 up until noon. So he'll do appointments on Saturdays up until noon. And if he hasn't set the number of appointments that he needs to, then he'll spend Saturday morning prospecting to get there. Now, did I tell you guys how much money he made last year? I think it was just under $2 million. And this is his schedule. See, a lot of times people look at it and go, oh, yeah, but I'll bet he's never with his family.
Russ, isn't it closer to 3 million right now?
It could be, but I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought I heard 3
Do you know,
million.
Mariella, do you know how much, Brian? Oh, my timer just
I
went
don't
off.
know. I don't know exactly in a year, but I know that I think was the 3rd quarter last year, he made 800,000. So
Yeah.
probably more than a
Yeah,
year.
so 3rd quarter of last year, he made $800,000. So it probably is closer to 3 million, but either way, he's typically home by 6. And most people look at that and go, yeah, but I wouldn't want his life. No, you would.
You would.
He's home by 6 o'clock typically, right? Okay. Now, if you don't have appointments for you guys that are newer, until you get appointments, then my recommendation is during that 3 o'clock time frame when you would have had an appointment, that you call or stop by 2 for sale by owners and or 2 expired listings. That you go stop by during those 3 and then 5 o'clock.
Sorry to bug you, but what's
Probably about 11:30.
Okay.
But well, we won't be done before that. We'll be close, right around 11:30. Okay, so any questions on that?
schedule. Okay, now let me go to the next piece of this thing. So I'm gonna stop my screen share here. That off. Will you flip the light on and
Sure.
screen up for me? Yep. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do. So now let me show you a few pieces of this that just weren't up there, okay? So. Try to make sure I use dark colors. I noticed, by the way, Rick, for Morning Sense, yesterday I noticed Kenzie had written on the board, but I was on Zoom, couldn't see it.
Couldn't see it.
And she had written, so make
Okay,
sure that you
good.
use a black or something.
Perfect.
Okay. Now, remember I said to you guys that essentially the prospecting or the indirectly productive is probably the most important thing. Here's what I meant by that, is watch this. This is what most agents' real estate career looks like. Meaning, they have money, they don't have money. They have money, they don't have money. They have money, they don't have money. They go through this, I made a lot of money, now I don't hardly have any money. Now I made a lot of money, now I don't have any money. The reason that happens is because of this. Now that you've seen what I've shown you in terms of the productive, indirectly productive, and non-productive, here's what happens. So we start down here with nothing, right? And based on what I just told you, what should you guys be doing between 9 and noon? Which in terms of our tip analysis, what is that called? Okay, so that would be I time. So remember, I'm going to give you this paper that you can track your time on. Do you happen to have one handy?
I can go get it.
Will you go grab like three for these guys? Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna then start prospecting, which is indirectly productive. And until you get appointments, you don't have any productive time, or what I call P time. So you're gonna just do a whole bunch of indirectly productive stuff. But here's the thing, what happens is this. So if you thought of this line here as this is productive, everything that happens on this axis is productive. Everything that happens on this one is non-productive. Everything that happens this way would be counterproductive, but we aren't going to worry about that one. Indirectly productive is going to look something like this, which I usually put it like kind of like train tracks kind of a thing. This is indirectly productive, which then leads to the productive time. Okay. So think of it that way, as indirectly productive leads to productive, if you're doing it right, okay? So we start doing this indirectly productive, which then leads to productive. But then what would you guess productive time leads to? Meaning you get a listing appointment, or you go out on a listing appointment and they sign a listing agreement. What does that now create for you to have to do?
Non-productive stuff.
Perfect. That creates non-productive activities, because as soon as you get that, now you got to go order the photography to get the photographer to go out. You got to deal with scheduling to get the photographer out. You got to get all the paperwork filled out to turn into the office. Like, can you see all of a sudden it creates all this non-productive stuff that we then start doing all this non-productive stuff, because what did we drop out of our business? The indirectly productive, which also now this deal closes. Guess what this moment right there is called?
Called the oh crap moment.
Yep, that's exactly. I was going to not be so nice. I was going to say this is the oh shit moment right there. And because what? You realize what?
Gotta go get another one.
I don't have anything else going on. So now what do I got to do? Prospect. So now I start to prospect, which leads to productive time. So I'm prospecting, I get productive time, prospect, productive time. No, I got more non-productive time because I got to negotiate the offer, and we got to get the dang home inspector that's going to come out and kill my deal for me, right?
Facilitator. I like to say.
I'm just kidding. Joaquin does home
I'm a
inspections. That's why.
facilitator.
And they do a good job, actually, it's home inspections of Utah. They do a good job of trying to keep the deal together, not kill
We
it.
don't make them out of a molehill.
Yeah,
We explain things to folks.
yeah.
We love that.
All right, so non-productive, oh crap moment.
Now this is what happens. This is why agents go make money, then they don't have money, make money, they don't have money. Because as soon as they get this, they feel like, oh, sweet, I've made it. I don't have to prospect anymore. But then the deal closes and the problem is it usually is going to take somewhere between 30 and 90 days to get this back to happen again. So when you quit prospecting, every day that you quit prospecting, you're now you're creating this to happen. Does that make sense? Okay. So now watch this. So here's the next piece of this. In terms of this, so you're tracking every day on this paper that you're showing, okay, I'm doing indirectly productive and productive and non-productive, and I'm tracking all that stuff. At the end of every day, so let's just do it this way. Let's just say that today was Monday here, okay? And Monday I did it, and at the end of Monday, I had worked, let's just say a total, just to keep the math easy, I'm gonna say 10 hours, okay? I worked 10 hours today. Oops, 10 hours today, and of those 10 hours, 2 I spent on appointments, so productive, and 3 I spent indirectly productive. So what that tells me is that I was at 50% between indirectly productive and productive, which means I was 50% non-productive. So immediately, now let me say this. Don't judge yourself on one day of this. You have to do more than one day of tracking of this before you can say to yourself, like, okay, I figured out the pattern. So think of it as what you're looking for is the pattern of this, not necessarily what one day tells you. Because after one day, like you might feel horrible about yourself if you tracked it off one day. But really, you need to see about 2 weeks worth of this before you can kind of say, okay, I see what's happening. So now, let me show you what that means. Let's say that on Tuesday, what happened, and let's say that this actually, I'll just do Tuesday plus, because I'm just going to say, if we averaged it out over 2 weeks, what we found was that I was typically ending up being around 30%. No, sorry. I left out one piece that I forgot to tell you this, and I just realized as I wrote that down. The top producing agents, so Brian Burnett, if you were to have him track productive time, just productive, he probably still is only going to be around 33% productive. So what I mean is this. So think of it this way. It's not linear. It works more like this, where if you, every time you are a little bit more productive, so if this was the money you were going to make, moving this way on the productivity scale of this, moving here, let's say this is 10% productive, and this up here is 20% productive. This here, that increase doubling here is probably 4 or 5 times in terms of income. Does that make sense? So it's not linear. Meaning if you just said, if I'm 2% more productive, that I'll make 2% more money, 2% being more productive probably equates to 10 or 20% more in income. That's what I'm saying, okay? So let's say that looking between the indirectly productive and the P time, I was 30%, okay? But keeping in mind, most agents in this business are probably in terms of just productive time. Not both, this is both added together. Most agents in terms of productivity are somewhere less than 11% productive. And that's people that are making over 100 grand a year. They're still only 11% productive. Versus a Brian Burnett who's making between $2 and $3 million a year is probably on productive somewhere around 33%. Just productive, meaning that he's going on appointments and stuff. But if you looked at his total, these two added together, I'll bet you he is in excess of 60% and maybe even closer to 70 on those two added together. Follow me? Okay. So here's what I'm saying here, and let me even probably back up and clarify it this way. if you were to come to me or to Rick, and that's why I knew Rick had these. If you came to me and you said, Russ, I want you to coach me. The very first thing I would do is say to you, I need to know where you're spending your time. Fill this out. Fill this out for a week and then let's meet again and let's look at it. And then when you came back, what I'm going to look at is how those two added together between your prospecting and your appointments that you go on, what percentage of your time is being spent. And if you came and you told me I was at 30% between I and P added together, I'm going to say to you, we need to figure out where your time is going then and increase the amount of prospecting that you're doing. Okay. Now, what if this though? Let's say that somebody showed up to me and you came and you were like, Russ, look, I'm at 65% prospecting and appointments. So I and P added together. I'm at 65, but I'm not making any money. I know that it means one of two things. Either you're lying to yourself, so by the way, let me point out on this. You'll notice on the sheet on the side there, it says power comes out of telling the truth. The reason I put that on there is because a lot of times, and I was guilty of it. So the reason I put it on there was for me, it wasn't for you guys, but I would lie to myself on that I was prospecting when I really wasn't. I would justify things and call it prospecting. And so I put on there, power comes out of telling the truth because I had to tell myself the truth. So if somebody comes to me and says, I'm doing 65% between I and P added together, but I'm not making any money, I know they're either lying, and I don't mean that like lying, but like they've convinced themselves that they're prospecting what they're really not, or it's a skill set issue. There's a problem with their skill set. And here's what I've found that it is. If you're high on this, but not making money, you need help on closing. You're not asking for the appointment. Okay. Now, let's say though that somebody came to me and they were high even on their productive time, but not making money. So meaning they're setting appointments, but they're not turning into transactions. It's either they're lying again, meaning they're convincing people to meet with them that aren't really real, just so that they can pad their numbers. Or they're going on the appointments and not asking people to sign a contract. That happens a lot too. They'll go out on a presentation and they'll say, so Joaquin, what do you think? And don't be committal. Be, well, we'll have
That's
to think.
nice. I'm just not sure.
Okay. Well, let's go look at the next one then. So that's what happens. They don't close. Because instead, in fact, one of my really, really good friends, he's now a homicide detective. He got out of real estate a number of years ago, went and became a police officer, and he's now a homicide detective. But he actually said to me one day, in fact, it's the same guy that I told you the story that he said, I'm available 365 days a year, 24/7. This same guy, he's now a homicide detective for Taylorsville City. But I was talking to him one day and all of a sudden, because he had gone from doing okay in the business to started to doing really well. And so I asked him one day, his name is Garrett. I said, Garrett, what changed? And he said, I went from doing the, what do you think of the house? And the person saying, say what you said again. I don't remember what you said.
Oh, it's nice. We're just really not sure.
Yeah, we're not sure. He said, I went from that to saying, well, should we go write it up and see how cheap we could get it for you? And he said, that's all I added. And all of a sudden people started going, well, do you think we could get it for this price?
Right.
And he said, well, I don't know, let's go find out. And we would write the offer. So the point being, if you're going on a lot of appointments and you're not getting the transactions, the next step is to make sure you're asking people, do you want to write an offer? Or if you're on a listing appointment, saying, how soon do you want to get this on the market? Is just asking those closing questions. So that's what I found is if you'll track your numbers, your first objective is to get to 60% or more between I and P added together. Now, you'll notice I still haven't said anything about a total number of hours worked. So I'm not telling you a number of hours you got to work, but you do need to know the total, because at the end of the day, you're going to divide the number of hours into I and P into the total to get that percentage. So you have to have the total to get to the percentage. But you'll notice I haven't told you a percentage to use or a total to use. All right, questions? Do you understand what to do? You're going to do it.
Yes.
So, okay, so for you guys that are here, use what Rick gave you as a master copy. And then for you guys on Zoom, shoot me an email and I'll email you this same thing. Keep it as a master copy and then make extra photos, copies of it, so that you have one for every day that you're working. What are you
That's when
smiling?
Jeep went off.